Hey yo, this is Dash, and I'm going to be taking care of these two briskets. One is going to be getting sliced up for a catering event. The other is going to be sliced up to be portioned out by the pound for a few different customers. Hey yo, this is Dash. Get ready. So this brisket here, I've already drained the jus and the fat off of these two briskets, and you can see I have that separated in that fat separator there. And here's my scale. Here are the containers that I'm going to be weighing everything out in. These are the containers that I will be putting the residual jus in once I get to that portion of this. All right. Now, what I'm going to do first, I'm going to take the brisket that I have for the catered event, and we're going to get it over on my cutting board. Now, this cutting board, I love this cutting board. This is, you guys who have been watching the videos recently have seen this cutting board a lot. This cutting board was actually provided to me by CustomCuttingBoardsRUs.com. It is called the brisket board. It's 35 inches long, 18.5 inches wide, and 3/4 of an inch thick. It is beefy. No pun intended. Anyway, watch me get this done. So here I'm going to show you how I do this, and I'm going to try and talk throughout this whole thing, and I'm going to slow down and give you a great explanation and kind of talk you through my thought process when I do different things. So first things first, I have two different knives. This is a serrated, this is a 12-inch serrated lasting cut slicing knife, and then we have a straight edge lasting cut slicing knife. Both of these knives were procured from the Restaurant Depot. They're both about 15 bucks. I found a guy local that would sharpen these knives. He does a business discount, so he sharpened them for $5 a piece. I took all of my knives here towards the end of last summer and got them all sharpened, and I will probably be getting them sharpened once a quarter, and lovely. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead and get the point, which is the muscle on the top, separated from the flat on the brisket. The brisket is comprised of two different muscles. The flat runs this way and the point runs this way. As far as the fibers, you can see this brisket kind of had a hole in it when it was, and when I started, so you can see that little window there, how convenient. But the fibers on the brisket run this way on the point, and the fibers of the brisket run this way, well, kind of like this way on the flat. So because I have two different directions of the fibers, I actually separate the muscles. There is a piece of fat that runs in between them. You can stick your knife in and right through them, and you can separate the muscles very easily. So I'm gonna take the point, separate that, and then I come in, and this fat that's in here, it really is just that. It is fat. I feel like I don't charge for this, and I'm just gonna cut some of it off, not all of it, some of it off. Just, again, I want to ensure good mouthfeel. This piece of fat here, I'm gonna come in and trim that off, and it'll be okay because I turn the flat over. Now, again, the grains of the meat are running this way, so I'm cutting perpendicular to those grains, and we're gonna come in and now full hand on the brisket so it doesn't move anywhere, and get the slicing. I prefer a thinner slice. Some people prefer a thicker slice. When I am doing events for catering, the thinner the slices, the longer the meat will last, because people aren't compelled to take. Now if I cut a slice like this and people take two of those slices, so we have here and here, that's this much of the brisket. Now if I'm cutting slices half that and people take two slices, you see again how that brisket just stretches longer. Now this brisket is actually cooled to room temperature. I did this brisket overnight and it has been sitting on the counter for about 2 hours. I am going to get it sliced up. Now it's not cold, it is room temperature, it's not warm to feel. I do prefer to let my briskets cool for at least 1 hour before slicing. And you see I'm coming against the grain. If this brisket were warmer, it would be a little easier to do this. But because I've let it cool, it is a little harder. I'm gonna say rudely interrupted, but my wife came up here to show me a sausage maker. She's down in the basement cleaning up the basement. Most of you guys know everyone is stuck in their homes, so my wife is taking this opportunity to clean up the basement so she can have a space for herself. All right, so I have my brisket all sliced up. Now what I do is turn this off to the side slightly, and we're going to make this smaller pieces. So because this brisket is so wide, I'm going to cut it into thirds, about here and about here. And what this does is, again, for a catered brisket, the smaller the pieces, the smaller the portions, the longer it'll last. When you're having a catered event, the last thing you want to do is provide somebody the means to be able to take a quarter of your brisket or a quarter of whatever it is you have, and there not be enough for everyone. Pick it up with my knife, transport it over to the pan. Now this portion might be a little too long, so we'll take about this amount, get it down in here, and then we will fill in the corners with this portion here. I'm gonna have to squeeze this in here. Here we go. Every brisket is different, and they all fit in the pans differently. If I wanted to separate them into 2 half pans because I think that this is going to be for the event is greatly reduced, obviously, again, because of everything that's going on in the world. And after speaking to the customer, I don't think she's going to be eating all of it, or they are going to be eating all of it. Her and her husband are going to be eating all of it at one time. So if I put it in 2 separate pans, 2 smaller pans, it will be easier for them to store this in the refrigerator. These full pans, they take up a lot of room in the refrigerator. The half pans, you can take and you can stack them on top of each other and save some space. So that's why I'm doing it in half pans today. So I'm going to slide this out of the way, get this here, clean up my cutting board a little bit, just get some of the big chunks and pieces out of the way, and I'll just throw those into the pan that the point is going into, because by the time it all comes together, it'll be fine. Now with the point, there's a lot of extra fat right here on the top, so I just take my thumb, push it down and through, and you can see that's all fat. There's a little nugget there of meat. Now with this, what you do is you cut with the grain to make them into smaller pieces, and then you cut against the grain for your actual slices. So with the grain, now I'm going to take and turn these off to the side. I can look in between here, and any fat that's underneath or in between, I'll just carefully get out. All right, and that goes into the trash pile. Same thing. Once you get the hang of this, you'll be able to, I won't say do it with your eyes closed, but you can feel that fat in between, and we're just gonna cut it out. Further down the brisket is not as bad, you can see, so we'll leave that. And then on this end, there shouldn't be much, if any, on the bottom side, but because the fat runs this way, and again, here we are, this is majority of fat, and there's a little sliver of meat there that we're not gonna worry about. Now, with this, again, whole hand, and I'm pushing and pulling. I like to push and pull to make a clean slice. Now, unfortunately, I should have done it, showing you on the point, excuse me, on the flat. When you go like this, herky jerky, you leave marks in the meat, and to me, that's just not appealing. So I try to be concise about my slices. And so then we're gonna pick this up. I'm gonna turn this way. Now you see how those little pieces and chunks didn't affect anything because that piece is smaller. Same thing. So I'm gonna grab a hold, and I'm steadying the brisket so that as I pull back and through, my thumb is moved out of the way. Now, you see I'm not doing this at 1,000,000 miles an hour, though I'm doing it slower for you guys to see. I still take my time. I reset my fingers and my knife every time before I pull back and start slicing, because I do not want to slice the tip of my thumb off. Yeah. Now I'll show you this. This is about how fast I do cut the brisket point when I am slicing for events. And I usually do almost about the same exact thing. Pick it up with the blade, get it all nice and neat arranged on the knife, get it into the pan, slide it off, and then once this is all done, I'll get that arranged. Now you see, the brisket is a little longer than the pan is, so we will have to do some arrangements in there. I didn't talk about it, but the reason I use the straight knife for the flat and the serrated knife for the point, I found that the serrated knife gets in and cuts through the fattier meat of the point better than the straight knife does. The straight knife will do it. It's just, I prefer the serrations. It just seems to cut in and down and through that a lot easier. Especially on the fattier pieces where the serrated knife kind of grabs in and bites the fat, versus the straight knife, it kind of just glides and rides the top. Now on this end piece, because this is kind of awkward, I just flip it up on this side, and we'll get in here and we'll do the same exact thing. Now you'll find that because this end piece was either exposed to your heat most, or it can be a little, not tougher, but it'll be harder. The bark is more better formed there. So just be careful when slicing so you don't hurt yourself or anything like that. And we'll get this in the pan just like that. All right. Now you see and clean the board up just a little bit. All right, let's get the other brisket. Okay, so as we talked about it before, this brisket is going to be sliced up for sales by the pound. And I think I had the brisket upside down. So people ask me all the time whether I prefer the point or the flat up. Now you can notice, or you see the differences between the two. This brisket had the point up, and you can see how hard it got. This brisket had the point down, and because it was sitting in, the fat sitting in the juices of the pan, it just doesn't do it any justice. Versus this is the point. You can see the difference between this, this flat and that flat. That flat is way more moist and tender, versus this flat is a lot harder and crustier. So there's more bark on this one than this one. Unfortunately, that is reality. And like I said, I prefer the point, the flat down in the fat, as opposed to the point being down in the juices. Now, because there's a lot of this fat hasn't rendered away and it was just sitting in those juices, I'm going to cut a lot of it off. But this brisket was actually very fatty when I was trimming it. Now, if you had to get one knife, I would actually recommend the serrated knife, but let me show you the reason. The serrations can and sometimes leave marks on your meat, versus the straight edge. It's a cleaner cut, and I don't think or know if you'll be able to pick that up on camera, because I can barely see the serrations. All right. Now again, this is a little harder than I would like the brisket to be. I prefer it to be, and you saw on that one, on the other one over there, that it was a lot easier to cut. This one is a little dried out for my taste. So we'll have to compensate the customers, and we'll give them a little extra meat. Now, when you get to this point, and when you see the brisket starting to flake away like that, this piece was a little overdone. And the reason it was overdone is because it's on the end and it's just a smaller piece. So sometimes it be like that. All right, so I'm going to leave these whole. I'm not going to worry about slicing them in half. The containers I have, again, we're going to get them to the point where I can slice them up, and I'll weigh it for customers. And my point, and again, I push right down through here so I can find out where the fat ends and the meat begins, and then I'm just going to come across with the grain, and with the grain. There's not much fat in between, so we'll leave that. And then I'm gonna come slice and I can feel that there's one little nugget of meat left in here, and I'll pull it out. This is really not my favorite. This is why I prefer to have the point up, the fat cap up, because the fat cap being down now, mind you, this piece of meat is very, very moist, but this piece of meat can stand to be upwards in the smoker, and or when it's finishing in a foil pan, as opposed to the flat. And again, you can see that flat is a little dried out again compared to the other one. I'm gonna get my scale here and container. So I leave the container on the scale so it zeroes out. And this order is gonna be for 2 pounds. So I'm gonna put 1 pound of moist brisket. Seriously.
You get the idea.
Thank you guys again as always for watching. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. If you like what you saw today, if you learned something, please leave me a comment and a thumbs up down below. Don't forget to turn that notification bell on so you can be notified whenever one of these videos goes live. Speaking of live, I go live every Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. 2 hours. First hour, we talk about barbecue and or something barbecue business related. Second hour, we kind of shoot the breeze, talk amongst friends. Make sure you bring a cool refreshment with you. Anyway, thanks again as always for watching. I'll see you next time.
More butter, baby.